What's up, everybody? These glasses are really reflective. They're really, really reflective, and I've got so many lights in here. They're so reflective. Really, really reflective. What's up, everybody? We're back here talking more Calgary Underground Film Festival. Today on the show, we are talking about Insert Coin. And this is a documentary about the rise and fall of the coin-op video game machine, the arcade game, if you will. Specifically, this focuses on one company, a company that started out as Williams Electronics. Eventually, they bought Bally's Midway, which was like their competitor when they were making pinball machines and such. And they were starting to get into arcade games too. They had a lot of like film IPs and stuff of that nature, so they could make more popular games. The documentary itself is kind of a standard talking head documentaries. It interviews a lot of the people involved, a lot of the classic game designers. A suspiciously absent Ed Boon, though. They do talk a lot about Mortal Kombat in here. Ed Boon nowhere to be seen. Noob Saibot. But as kind of a fluff piece for Williams Electronics and Midway Games, it does a pretty good job of laying out how they were successful. It doesn't really touch upon their failures that much until kind of the decline of the arcade machine itself. So to me, it feels a little bit too fluffy and maybe a little bit biased towards the company, but I mean, that's okay. It's more of just a nostalgia doc for people that played these games or people that want to learn more about them. I think it was really cool that the first kind of game that put them on the maps was this game Narc, and really they're taking credit for this whole movement of violent video games and like shooters and stuff, when I don't necessarily know if that's true. But they were looking at it from like a good marketing standpoint, where they realized there was a large opening for more realistic games. If you looked at the games at the time, they're all kind of like fantasy based, and to introduce a gun game is smart. This documentary interviews a lot of sweaty nerds, not only the guys that made all of these video games, but also some kind of pop culture icons. You've got like Jeff Gertzman from Giant Bomb, and a lot of people kind of like that, just classic sweaty nerd guys. This documentary kind of covers all of their big hits that they made for the arcade games, like Smash TV was the second one. Then they moved into Terminator 2. They showed it to old Jimmy Cameron, and he loved it immediately. And then they tell the story about Mortal Kombat, about how it was supposed to be just like a filler game while they had some free time before their next big client. They were going to make it like a Jean-Claude Van Damme game, but like Jean-Claude Van Damme is classically hard to work with, so it just didn't work out. And they're like, okay, make your own characters, and that's kind of the invention of Mortal Kombat. And it was so good that they're like, okay, this isn't just a 6-month project anymore. We are really going to work on this. And some of the lore about these games is kind of interesting, like in Smash TV, how one of the programmers just added in that if you get a high enough score, you get to go to the Pleasure Dome, and like that, it was never even in the game. It was just like a little text thing to get people to spend more quarters. And it is kind of like a weird thing where when you look at these games, they wanted to like make someone spend a quarter every 45 seconds. So that's why these games were like so hard, and they were just like a marketing tool to collect 25 cents at a time. And for things like Mortal Kombat, the reason like the combos for the fatalities are so fucking ridiculous movements, that is because they're kind of like hidden for people to discover, even though everybody kind of found them immediately. The Mortal Kombat section takes up a lot of this film. It's kind of split up into 12 different segments, which they call credits. But Mortal Kombat's kind of like the big section. You know, there's a lot to talk about. The other big section was probably NBA Jam, because, I mean, NBA Jam is such a classic game. That's still a game I see in all the barcades, is the NBA Jam cabinet. And then they also talked about a couple weird ones in here, like Revolution X is a game that I've never heard of personally, but it was like this Aerosmith-led time travel game or something. I don't know, it looked real weird and bad. And it kind of just leads up to the culmination of the home console and how that was just destroying the arcade. And how when the N64 came out, they were using Williams's hardware to make it work. So, you know, they kind of lost out to their own competitor by giving them games, essentially. And I think for the most part, it is an interesting documentary. Whether or not some of the stories are embellished, I don't think matters that much, because everyone that worked on these games are proud of them, and they're enthusiastic about the games they've made. And I think that really helps in this kind of documentary. Just a classic talking head documentary. You just got the camera static set up and let people talk about their experiences. And I think it does work in this. It's certainly of interest if you're into video games, and specifically 80s and 90s era arcade games. It's definitely a walk down memory lane. I mean, it's not the best documentary in the world, but it definitely is a good overview of the arcade craze and how specifically they created a team at Midway and Williams of creative people, and they didn't really try and stifle that creativity at all. Like, Mortal Kombat was like a clear version of Ed Boon and John Tobias. Like, the fatalities and everything, like, they knew they were going to get bad press from this. Like, there was a lot of controversies with it. They kind of just saw it as any press is good press, and they didn't tell them to take out anything. They're like, add more crazy stuff. And that's like kind of a good example of how sometimes you got to push the boundaries of creativity if you actually want to be successful. I don't think that necessarily works in every case, but in this specific case, the innovation is what drove them to success. And, you know, it is an interesting story. So for this one, I'm going to give it 3 stars. Definitely worth a watch if you're into this kind of thing. Otherwise, it's probably a skip, but certainly some good content in there. So if you have seen this one, you'll want to see it, let me know in the comments below. You've got, as this recording goes out, got 1.5 days to watch some stuff at the Calgary Underground Film Festival. So head on over there. All this week we're going to be covering it. So there's going to be a lot of videos. So check those out, and I will see you tomorrow.
Why don't you play us something, baby? Why don't you play us something? Why don't you play us something, baby?
Start? I don't feel so good.